Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and after a quick internet poll tonight, it was decided that between nuclear weapons and killer asteroids, we wanted to talk about killer asteroids, specifically the TV show Salvation, which ran this year. It had about 12 episodes, and it has been renewed for a second season. And the basic core plot point is that there is a killer asteroid heading towards the Earth. But the writers of the show decided that they needed more drama. So on top of this, you have computer hackers looking for the truth. You have Russian agents running around. You have people getting assassinated. And you have a coup against the US government. And over it all, we end up with the potential of nuclear war right at the end. And yeah, this makes for quite an entertaining, if not very accurate show. I'm going to say that, I obviously studied, astronomy, I worked in asteroids, but I also have a career in computer science, and I worked in computer security, and so I'm double face palming whenever I see mistakes, because on one hand, you've got a mistake in the computer side of things, and then you've got a mistake on the asteroid side of things. Now, to be fair, the producers, they did consult with Phil Plait, the bad astronomer, who I am a big fan of. He does awesome stuff, so while I may be making jokes, calling up flaws in this, I totally understand that, the producers may not show everything to everyone involved. And I actually have a similar experience. You see, I have a friend back at Armagh who worked on a book about a killer asteroid that was used by a weapon, and there were Russian agents running around and computer hacking, and it seems really kind of familiar. But yeah, Bill Napier, astronomer, really knew his killer asteroids, and he wrote Nemesis. Now, I was there, I was the local computer nerd that knew all about computer security, and so I actually gave him a lot of advice. I helped him out, I gave him a bunch of language. We actually, went over certain sections of the book to make sure that they made sense. And then, of course, through the editing process, somehow all of this wonderful work got lost. And when I look at this, I'm just like, oh, who wrote this stuff? So, this happens. It's not uncommon, and it's not confined to TV or movies or anything. So yeah, Salvation. Yeah, let's get started. How do we find out there's an asteroid out there? Well, on one side you have the US government with their network of telescopes, and they find this object out there. A 7-kilometer chunk of rock which is heading towards the Earth. It's near Jupiter, but it will hit Earth in 180 days. Now, I'm going to say they did get some stuff right here. 7-kilometer asteroid is just about the right size to be an incredibly, life-ending threat, right? This is something that would be big enough to wipe out civilization on Earth, leave very few survivors. It's not like Armageddon where they got something this size of Texas, Mr. President. Or, right? They got that right. That's not ridiculous. I'm going to say the orbit simply doesn't work, right? It has to get from Jupiter to Earth in 6 months. Well, we've just had Comet 2017 U1, right? Interstellar, going faster than any other object in the solar system. And if you look at its orbit, in January, it passed the orbit of Jupiter. And then in August, it would pass the orbit of Earth on the way in. So even that, going faster than anything else, took 8 months. So this is not a periodic object. It's clearly an interstellar origins. That doesn't really make sense, but I think this is just TV shows saying we can't deal with deadlines of 10 years, right? Which is much more realistic. We've got to have a fast, ever-present threat to make things happen quickly. Now, in all fairness, there are several scenes where we see the asteroid on a viable orbit that would make sense given the 180-day deadline. But in other scenes, we see the asteroid literally sitting next to Jupiter, and I think this is the CGI team getting some miscommunications, because in some places we actually see the asteroid is a long way from Jupiter, and every time we actually see the asteroid rendered, it's right next to Jupiter. And that doesn't actually work. So I think this is the CGI team taking something and running with it and running off into fantasy science land. Now, one of the characters is an MIT whiz kid, and he's running a computer simulation of the solar system, and he sees there's a flaw in it. There's some gravitational influence that is not being accounted for, and he managed to deduce from this information that there is a 7-kilometer object heading for the planet Earth. Now, okay, so in real life, yes, Astronomers were able to find discrepancies in orbits of Saturn to help locate Uranus, and then discrepancies in that orbit were used to find Neptune. But it wasn't hugely accurate. It kind of gave them the rough area to look at, but they still had to search. To predict that there is a 7-kilometer object, which, okay, that is, 250 million tons of stuff, to figure out that its influence is missing and then somehow project that to hitting the Earth, that is way beyond anything that is possible, right? You would need to catalogue every single asteroid to basically figure this out. So it doesn't work in that way. It's kind of a weak plot point. I mean, there's plenty of other ways they could have done it. You could have been pointing a telescope and found that out. I didn't really like that part. Now, very quickly, Liam ends up in the inner circle as they're trying to figure out how to divert this asteroid without letting the public know. And one of the things that comes up is the gravity tractor, which is fantastic that they bring this in, because the gravity tractor is a legit idea and it's actually one of the best ways to divert asteroids. What you do with a gravity tractor is you have a regular spacecraft and you move it up next to the asteroid, and then you can fly it next to it and fire its engine, and the gravity of the spacecraft pulls the asteroid along very, very slowly. This is great because you can optimize your spacecraft to give it the highest specific impulse engines. You don't need to waste mass on hardware which would be involved in landing, and you don't need high thrust engines for landing. You can just use like low thrust ion engines. So this was one of the guys behind this is Ed Lu, who you may have seen on my channel a couple of times. He's the guy that one of the guys behind the B612 Foundation.
It will probably come down overnight.
Yeah, it definitely does.
You should have really thought about that parachute.
We don't need us thinking parachutes.
Yeah, well...
Again, gravity tractor is great, but 180 days is not enough for it to work. Now, they already said that the asteroid was 7 kilometers across, and the thing about the gravity tractor is the force is stronger the closer you get to the center. So by having a 7-kilometer asteroid, the closest you can get to the center is 3.5 kilometers. So you can do the math saying, okay, if we have a 3.5-kilometer displacement on an asteroid, how much mass would the space probe have to pull it 6,400 kilometers, which is the radius of the Earth, in 180 days? And it works out to be something like 15,000 tons. And that simply doesn't work. If you go back and you do the math, or if you've got an object that's coming in 180 days to impact, and you give it one kick, how big a kick do you have to give it? Well, it's about 42 centimeters per second. Right, 42 centimeters per second times 180 days gets you about 6,400 kilometers. And yeah, it just doesn't work as a gravity tractor. If they had talked about a 10-year threat, then it would make a lot more sense. Now, the next trick that they do is they bring in the EM drive. And we all know that the EM drive is one of these things that probably is going to be proven wrong at one point. But it's a TV show, and they can do whatever they like. They struggle with getting this thing to work. And eventually they do one test where they put it in a big glass case and they say, we're going to show that the EM drive works, and they ramp up the power. But it doesn't work. It doesn't show any movement or anything. So the guy in charge of the project's like, no, we need more power. But it won't handle that. Of course, they predictably put the power up just a bit. The thing then explodes in a giant fireball, which doesn't really make sense because the EM drive is essentially a copper frustrum, a copper chamber with microwaves inside it. There's nothing in there to combust, to catch fire, to explode in a giant conflagration. But it is a TV show, so of course we want the best special effects that we can have. So with the EM drive failing, the next plan is to use an existing space probe out at Jupiter, the Io probe. After all, the asteroid is near Jupiter, so why not use it? Well, I'll tell you why not, because a satellite of our space probe of about 1 ton hitting a 250 billion ton object isn't going to knock it up to 42 centimeters per second that you need to make it miss Earth. Never mind the fact that if it was flying past Jupiter on its way to Earth in 6 months' time, it would be moving at about 30 kilometers per second, and therefore no spacecraft could catch up with it, right? But they do this scene, of course, and during this scene they have a direct telemetry link. In fact, they have a camera on the spacecraft, and this is one of the biggest mistakes in the whole thing. You know, you can know, you might not have caught all these things unless you did the math, but you should immediately see spacecraft at Jupiter, and they push the button to start the engines firing, and the engines start firing right away. There is zero light space communications lag in this. So, yeah, we also get to see pictures of the asteroid at this point. Now, 7-kilometer asteroid, it appears to be spinning rather quickly. In fact, I'm pretty sure if I did the math on this, and I didn't, that if it was spinning this quickly, it would fly apart. It just looks like a giant rock tumbling through space. And that is not what you see when you have large objects. They have to rotate more slowly than their gravitational binding forces allow. So yeah, not that great. Now, of course, the spacecraft then gets taken over by Russian hackers or something like that. Actually, I don't remember who took it over, but yeah. They do eventually get control of it again, and then somehow it gets destroyed by the gravity of Jupiter, which really doesn't make any sense, but whatever, it was rather hilarious to watch that happen. Fast forward several episodes, and we finally get the launch of a working EM drive. And boy, yeah, the sequence of photos here, that I'm showing you, they have these nice graphics showing the launch happening, and they have the numbers, the velocity, the speed and the altitude. This thing in 3 seconds goes from 0 to 10 kilometers. I think whoever did the graphics didn't understand the difference between meters and kilometers. We also actually see as part of this that the target, the EM drive, is supposed to be able to deflect the asteroid by 1/4 of the lunar distance, which is quite a substantial number. It's almost like 100,000 kilometers, so that's way bigger than the 6,400. And again, they're still using the gravity tractor here, so yep, sorry, that means the spacecraft must now weigh, what, 100,000 tons to make that work? Didn't look that big, but maybe something with the EM drive distorts space-time in a way that we don't expect. But finally, with the spacecraft on its way, surely ready to deflect the asteroid, there's another twist. Mother Nature bumps a little asteroid against the bigger one, which is called Samson, by the way, and they now realize that the asteroid is made of iron instead of silica, therefore is much heavier and much harder to divert. Well, that is sort of legit. I'm going to ask, if that's true, why didn't Liam's gravitational model figure out the mass of the object beforehand and then realize it was made of iron rather than silica? Oh yeah, because he just made that up. Also, yeah, if it was made of iron, that would make it at most 4 times heavier. So the deflection distance would be 1/4 of 1/4, that would be 1/16 of a lunar distance, which is still way beyond the Earth and is perfectly safe. Yeah, basically, you know, this plot point get introduced. If they hadn't said 1 kilometer or 1/4 lunar distance, it would have been fine. They could have totally got away with it. But no, they had to make it seem bigger and badder and more epic than it was. But look, yeah, it's fun to talk about these things. It is, I think it's quite fun that it's got a series 2, or season 2. There's so many plot holes I can knock in this thing. I just really wanted to focus on the asteroid side of things. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it. It'll be interesting to see what new giant plot twists they can introduce, because I think they've gone through every single crazy thing in the playbook. It'll be back next year, and until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.